to our next presenter that's with me here in the studio. Welcome, Martin.
Hello.
Hello and welcome. And we'll head over to your presentation. Hobby scale, making web apps with minimal fuss.
Yep.
Stage is yours.
Thank you. I'm just going to stay on this title screen for a moment because this is a interactive presentation. So some of the slides you'll be able to interact with. So I just want to stay on this until everyone has a moment to either type in that URL or scan the QR code. Though if you're just viewing this on mobile, then I guess it's kind of hard to watch the presentation and interact. So don't worry if that's you. You're not missing out on too much. Okay, enough stalling. Next slide. Quick disclaimer, I'm going to be talking about a tool called Lamdera. I don't have any financial ties with it, but I am good friends with the creator of it. Okay, a little about me. As a hobby, I make web apps. For example, here's a web app where you can fight over which color is the best. People have already figured out how to use it. That's good. Yeah, so you pick a color, and then everyone else sees that color, and they can be like, no, I disagree. And so they might pick their own color. And as you see down at the bottom here, there has been some disagreement, 8,000 disagreements. I'll just pick blue and we'll be on, nope, blue, let's just move on now. Here's another app that I've made. It's called Question and Answer. I created this because at work we would sometimes have like leadership would give a presentation. Afterwards, they'd take questions and give answers. But the tool we used for that I did not like, so I made my own. So you should be able to, at the bottom on your screen, be able to write your own questions here and place them. Thank you. I actually presented this once. I showed this off as a presentation, then I used the actual app as my question-taking device. But save your questions to the end. Don't use this. Here's another app I made. Same company. I was annoyed with another tool we used, which it was called Moment of the Month. It was basically like a culture building thing where just at the end of each month, we would start up this app and you could write what your favorite moment of the month was, and it would like build a big list of them and cycle through them. The version we were using originally sucked, so I made my own again. So you can, yeah, write your own favorite moments this month if you want to reveal that. What's mine? My favorite is, let's be a bit pandering. Speaking at Func, Prog, Sweden. That's mine. And so in my version, it falls from the sky and lands there. And if lots of people write their favorite moments, then it builds up a nice tower. On to the next app. Sorry, no apps. More apps later. Yeah, 2 years ago, I would have not bothered making these apps. These are all conceptually pretty simple, but there's a lot of infrastructure work that's needed. And to be clear now, when I say web app, so you think of like a static web page, that's not what I would call a web app. Static web page is fixed content. The backend's only job is to just serve that content. It has no other functionality. So a web app then it has content that's interactive. It has a backend that can get messages from that front end live at runtime and send out new messages if needed. Yeah, so for the infrastructure work, if like this was my job, yeah, sure, I'll tolerate that. But in my free time, I'm doing things to relax or to have fun, and I don't have that much free time usually. So, yeah, 2 years ago, no way, I would have not made these things. Getting more explicit, like what kind of infrastructure work is there in particular? This is kind of just an arbitrary list, but just to give you an idea of the kind of legwork that's needed. You need like a database. You need some way of having persistence on your back end. Using the first app I showed where you pick the best color. It's a really simple app. You need to keep track of what the last color someone picked was, and you also need to like keep some kind of ID on them. So if they switch the color multiple times, you don't count that multiple times for the little counter in the bottom right. So yeah, I need some kind of persistence for that. And then you need some way of reading and writing to that persistent storage. Like, are you going to use SQL or no SQL? There's probably other things I don't know of. How are you going to send data to and from your front end and back end? So like HTTP, WebSockets, how are you going to encode that data, decode that data? Are you going to use REST? There's lots of decisions to make. And like usually you'll set up some kind of tool like GraphQL, for example, to try to make this more easy, but there's still configuration you need to do. And then just your environment when you're developing this. You need hot reloading, presumably, because if you want to see your changes you made to the front end, hitting refresh every time is time consuming. And you need to run the back end locally to make sure that your front end is communicating with the back end the correct way. And also so you can quickly see if changes you made to the back end work. And then DevOps stuff, like deploying your database, deploying your front end, deploying your back end, those configuration scripts. You need to set those up somehow. You want to probably automate those configuration scripts with like CI every time you push code to GitHub. You want these deploys to occur, so that's even more configuration then. You need some kind of server hosting. Someone has to run the back end somewhere. More configuration. And then there's like the actual stuff, like the things you wanted to do in the first place, the domain specific logic. You got to write your front end, you got to write your back end. So about 2 years ago, I discovered a tool called Lamdera. It's developed by a guy named Mario Rogic, and I would describe it as a opinionated platform for creating and hosting full stack web apps. The tool uses a programming language called Elm. For the most part, I don't think people have heard of this language, though this is Func Prog Sweden, so maybe more people than normal have heard of it. But the short of it is it's a language that's strictly a pure functional language. So whereas like, for example, F# has a lot of escape hatches, so you can be, quote unquote, pragmatic when you need to, and like do mutability when you need to, or do some kind of unmanaged side effect when you need to. Elm, in contrast, does not allow for that. It's much more strict. You think of like Haskell, but this is less academic in its culture, and it's more of a simple language. If we go back to our web app checklist now, but for Lamdera, all these blue boxes, the boxes that have been checked off, these are things now that just Lamdera does for you. So it's just an implementation detail. Set up the database. I don't know how it's done. Lamdera does it for me. The data persists when it's on the back end. How do I, write code to query and read from the database? My code automatically has access to that state. It's a variable I can reference in my backend code. How do I send data to and from? Again, implementation detail. All I need to do is call lambdera.send to backend or lambdera.send to front end with a ID saying who I'm sending it to. Hot reloading, and running the environment, the backend locally. All I need to do is download the Lamdera binary, which is like you just add it to your path, and then you can call it from the command line. And then it's just one command line call, and then you have it running locally. Deploying, again, just one command line call, and then you have it deployed. And setting up server hosting goes along with this. It's just handled automatically when you deploy. So the only parts you need to do when you're using Lamdera is writing the backend code and the front end code. Unfortunately, Lamdera can't do this for you because that's like you're defining what your app does. You'll need to hire a programmer if you want these to be checked off automatically. So a bit more concretely then, as I mentioned, Lamdera Live and Lamdera Deploy you see here. But the first step would be just Lamdera init. You need to find an empty folder. You run Lamdera init. That populates the folder with your initial modules, and it gives you a little like starter app. And then Lamdera Live, when you run that, it shows the starter app in your browser and runs the backend automatically. and handles if a file changes, does hot reloading and such. Step 3, that's the one you actually have to put in the legwork for. You actually have to write your app. By the way, I'm saying business logic here, but since it's for a hobby, I guess that's kind of a weird term. But yeah, just the code that's intrinsic to defining what your app does. But once you've written that code, then step 4 is again a easy step. You go to the Lamdera dashboard. It has like its own website. You press the create an app button, give it a name, and then you just when you do Lamdera deploy, it will send code to this app you just created, and then it will be live. To give you a better idea of what this looks like, here's the backend code for the best color app. Again, the first app I showed where you could fight over which color is the best. This is the backend code for that, and it's so little code I can fit it in its entirety on this one slide. It's like 30 lines. Admittedly, color index, it's just an enum of the possible colors you can pick, so that's in a separate module. This is something Lamdera defines. It's so these are functions I can use, and types is just because Elm is a statically typed language. You define a backend model and a front end model, and you define the types of data that can be sent from the back end to the front end, and from the front end to the back end. So this is just a module that defines some types, and it's not very large either. And so don't worry if you don't know Elm then. You don't need to understand exactly what this code's doing. What I'm just trying to sell on is that it's very simple. If you did decide to learn Elm, I think you could pick this up like within a week. And as I mentioned earlier, like Lamdera send to front end. So what this is saying is that when we get an update from the front end, we have this message. That's the data the front end sent to us. And if it's a client connected message, then we don't change our model. We just leave that as. The model is our persistent data that I mentioned earlier that we can read without needing to write any database queries. But then when we do the client connected, we send back to the front end what the current color is and how many times the colors have changed. And if the color is changed, like someone presses what their favorite color is, then we increment the change count, and we add that new change count to our model. And the last thing we do is broadcast this new data to everyone, because everyone wants to see what the new color is so that they can react. Up here in the top right, I have just, it's a screenshot of the entire directory for this best color app then. So it's very small. You might notice the absence of any configuration files because, again, Lamdera is just, it's very opinionated in how it set things up. So there's no need to define all these different configurations. You don't need to write any YAML or any JSON or any of that sort of stuff. No JS file that like loads in lots of NPM modules and does weird things. No, none of that's needed. You just write some Elm code, 5 modules in this case, and then Lamdera deploy when you're satisfied. This evergreen thing here is a folder that's generated by Lamdera. And what that does is if you decide to deploy again, so you've already deployed once and you have some kind of data already out in production, and you decide, oh, hang on, I want to change something here, or I want to add a feature, or I want to remove something, and now your backend model is different. So you had defined this one type earlier, this one data structure to be your backend, and now it's a new data structure. What this evergreen does is it's creating a snapshot of all your types in your application when you do a deploy. So if you make a new deploy, what it can generate for you is just a function that's like your migration script. It just, here's what the old type was, your old backend model, and this is what we need it to be. Just implement this function for us, programmer, and then we can handle the rest. And then once you do that, once you've written this function that converts from the old model to the new model, then you're done, and you can deploy, and you don't need to drop the entire state of your application in order to have a new backend model. And also, again, you don't need to worry about like, because typically if you're doing this in like a outside of Lamdera, you're writing like an SQL migration script or you're being just very careful not to do any breaking changes. Like as your app grows, you just have more and more fields that can be none. Like some kind of nullable value to handle the fact that this data did not exist earlier. Lamdera sidesteps all that, but just when you deploy, you give it a function that says, here's how we get the old data to the new state. Yeah, so I showed you some simple apps, but at least if you're like me, you're like your little skeptic in your head is going off and going, well, that's great, but how many tools fall apart when they like reach some kind of real world use case, or they just work until they don't because, oh, by the way, you need to do this thing and don't do that thing. No, you can't do that, but the compiler can't warn you about it. So I don't think there's a way in a presentation I can easily like dispel those fears. I think the best approach is to just show you stuff I've made. And if you see the stuff I've made, you can hopefully believe that I would not spend my free time doing this if it only worked half the time and was frustrating the other half of the time. It didn't work well in a lot of cases. So let's see what the other more complicated use cases might be. So here's a app I've made called asciilab. It's a website for drawing ASCII art. It's like a shared canvas. So for example, if I type hello Func Prog Sweden, then hopefully, assuming the presentation didn't break, you should see that on your own screen. Actually, there is a 8-second delay between me saying something and you seeing it. So, okay, there you go. Yeah, yeah. Hello world. Hello you. And so yeah, this is something I made I think like 1.5 years ago. The first version of it, which looks almost the same as this version we have now, took like 2 weeks to make. Again, in my free time as well. And since then, I've just been me, friends, anonymous people on the internet have all just been drawing some really cool ASCII art. Actually, I'm not going to discredit some people. They draw really good stuff. So here's a little ASCII town we've been making. And one thing we can do, I have a mode here where I can show who drew what. So you can see like all this yellow text here it belongs to the same person. And if you're wondering, the green text is me. So everything that has the green color, I drew that. But yeah, there's lots of cool stuff here. The reason I made my own version, because there are lots of other websites that will do ASCII art drawing for you. Or yeah, that also basically lets you do ASCII art on a shared canvas. The reason I made my own is because these other websites lack the ability to like undo. They didn't have the ability to like box select and copy paste, that sort of thing. And one crucial one is these apps are always at the mercy of the user to not just obliterate everything with spam. So what I can do is I can click on a user and I can hide them, for example. So now all their changes are hidden for me specifically. But also when you hide changes, I get an email. Like I have an admin account. I'll get an email and I can go, oh yeah, that person's just being a jerk. Let me hide their changes for everyone. So that's what I felt was missing from other ASCII drawing websites. So I felt the need to make my own. And it's been a lot of fun. Again, because there's so little friction to making these websites. Yeah, it's actually fun. It's like a self-motivating cycle of like, I just made this thing and cool, now I can use this thing in my app. Oh, but what if I added this other thing? And like, yeah, it's a self-perpetuating cycle. And as a result, yeah, there's a lot of ASCII art here. Another thing is possible. There are some links in the code that actually get highlighted. So I can like click on this. There we go. Oops. That's actually the wrong link. Let me reset real quick. I created a poster. Let's see. Yeah, that one. I created a poster. Oh, dang it. Okay, it looks like the iframe has decided to not scale down the poster. This is a 3,000 pixel wide image. So you're seeing a little corner of it. Okay, oh well. I have a poster in my bedroom of a huge chunk of the ASCII art. It's cool. You just got to believe me on that. Also, I printed out a t-shirt, which I'm wearing now. that also has a bunch of ASCII yarn on it. If that shows up well in the presentation. What I should have put in the About Me slide at the beginning was I also like ASCII art, but you know that now. What else have I made? A friend of mine, this friend being Mario, so the same guy who made Lamdera, he hosts a Elm online meetup every month or so. He was using meetup.com to host the site, or to host the group, which I don't know if I haven't been keeping up lately with it, but at least at some point, meetup.com started charging group hosts. Okay, I should see you shaking your head. Yeah, nodding. Yeah, yeah, charges you money to run your group, which sucks. Like, I mean, I can understand why they're doing it because of discoverability. Like, people aren't going to find your group if you're not hosting it on meetup.com. But in this case, Mario's group, people were discovering it because he would link it on Twitter and on Slack, and so there wasn't any real value to having it on Meetup.com. Meetup.com was just charging some amount of money every month for no good reason. So I decided to make my own. It's called Meetdown instead of Meetup, and it's basically designed to be a slimmed down, free, importantly, version of Meetup.com. I can just hit search here and we can see some of the groups that exist. Most of these aren't active, but I have my own group for ASCII art, obviously, and Mario's group here then. So every month or so, host a Elm Online meetup, which you're welcome to join, by the way. Next app. This one is not interactive. So this whole, the title of this presentation is called Hobby Scale, but when there's a will, there's a way. I find ways to get this into my work as well. So I work at a startup called Relia, and so what we've been using Lamdera for is to create a web app for helping people find realtors if they're planning to sell their home. The reason this is just screenshots at the moment is because we haven't gone live with it yet. We're planning to do so in 2 weeks or so. So the timing wasn't quite right, but yeah, so this is something I've been working on at this startup then. And again, if you trust my opinion is I think it's working great, but I'm the one who introduced it, so of course I'd say that. But one thing I can say is we have a UI designer on our team. He's programmed a little bit, he's worked with CSS and HTML, and so he knows a little bit, but he's definitely not a programmer. But because Lamdera is so simple to set up, it's just, download the executable, the Lamdera executable, and then run Lamdera live. It was the hardest part was setting this up on his computer, was in setting up Git. But once we had that set up, he could easily start up the entire application. Like, it's running the back end. Running the back end locally is almost identical to running it live in production. And then what he could do is just go into the Elm code, and while he's not a programmer, he can look at text and go, okay, that text should be this, or oh, I can change these numbers and it'll adjust the spacing somewhere, which is great for me because it means a lot of the typical, the UX designer comes to you and asks, hey, can you tweak the value there, add some spacing here, change the color there, or add this new color, all those things he can just do himself, which greatly cuts down on the amount of time it takes to do those things. He can experiment with changes without needing to go to Figma, make the change there, ask me to look at the change, implement the change. So it's much shorter, it's much lower latency between making a change, seeing it in production. And also it's good for him because he doesn't need to wait on me all the time when I'm like, I'm busy with fixing a bug or, something like that. He can do it himself. So it's great for the both of us. There are more things I've made that were too time consuming to add slides for, and I don't think I'd have time in this presentation if I had a slide for each one of them. But real quickly, at 2020 New Year's Eve, I made a pretend credit sequence for a disaster movie that all my friends were part of. The disaster movie, being surviving COVID. And so the credits is just a sequence of pictures of friends, funny things they said, and towards the bottom some statistics of who wrote the most messages in our Discord server. fun stuff like that. Another thing, we used to run this game called the sheep game, which the goal of the game is everyone gets a list of questions, and the goal is to answer the questions the same way you think everyone else will. So you get points based on how many people have the same answer as you. That's why it's called the sheep game. You're being a sheep. This game's fun, but it's annoying to do it by hand because there's lots of tallying at the end to figure out who wrote the same thing as who. So I made a web app for it in Lamdera. The ASCII Collab webpage I just showed earlier. One of my colleagues asked me, hey, someone in our team is sick. Can we make a get well soon card using ASCII Collab? Sure, just start a new instance of it. Lambdera deploy, but point it towards another website instead. And then again later, can we make a goodbye card for a colleague who's leaving? Sure, why not? The first one took 30 minutes to set up. That's because I had to remove a bunch of features that did not make sense in a get well soon card instance of ASCII Collab. And then the second one took like 5 minutes because I already had the simplified version of ASCII Collab set up, and it was just Lambda deploy and check that it's running. You might have guessed it already. This presentation is running in Lambda. That's more of a gimmick. I'm not saying Lambda is for making presentations, but I'm already having fun using Lambda, so why not? And again, another presentation. Everyone who's you can go back later and click on the link here. I'm not going to open it now, but yeah, it's about Elm. Surprise. Also at work, and specifically my previous job, so not the startup now, but the previous company I was working at. We had an issue with we have our app, and it's used in several different markets which have their own languages. So we need market specific translations for each one of these for this app, which means then that we need to somehow get all of the translations out of our code to a translator. So typically, you put them in a spreadsheet, give the spreadsheet to the translator. Translator will give you back the spreadsheet with another column filled with the translations. And then you, by hand, need to take all those translations and put them in the right places. So the solution I came up with was, well, why not make a app that looks at our source code? We'll have like a specific structure for translations, so they can detect this specific code and automatically create a UI that shows like the English text and then a blank spot for the missing translated text. And so then we can just point a translator to this web app, and they just can fill it in there, and then it automatically generates a pull request for them. So we don't need to do all this busy work in between. Another thing, a Discord bot. So this is also like stretching the use case of Lamdera, because a Discord bot doesn't need a front end; it's just a back end. The one I made does have a front end because I just use it for an admin panel, but it didn't really need an admin panel, but it was nice to have. But yeah, it's just basically running the back end. But the reason I still use Lambda anyway was just because just running Lambda deploy and I'm done is just so much faster than anything else. So who cares if Lambda is like being an overachiever and also can offer me a front end in this particular case. Likewise for GitHub, I've written a bot called Elm Review Bot, and what it does is there's a tool called Elm Review that lets you. It basically does static analysis on your project. And so I'm using Elm Review. I'm running a few particular static analysis passes on all of the Elm packages, like libraries out there, and detecting common mistakes so that it can then generate a pull request on those packages with fixes to those mistakes. Yeah, so I've made lots of stuff in the past 2 years with Lamdera. I've really enjoyed making all these things. But this is not a silver bullet, so I want to have a trade-off slide here. For as much as I love Lambda, there are drawbacks, there are limitations. So let's go over those, because I think it's interesting to see both where something excels, but what it gives away in order to do those things well. So the first one, Elm only. This isn't an accident. Like you might be thinking, what's Elm? Why Elm? The answer is that Elm is a fairly simple language. It's only pure functions, managed side effects. these things are really important actually for Lamdera for it to work well. I guess in theory you could make some kind of Lamdera tool in another language, and they probably already exist. But what I think makes it work really well for what makes it work really well in Elm is that because Elm is just pure functions. For example, when you're writing a migration script, so it takes the old model, converts it to the new model. It'd be weird if your migration function could suddenly run side effectful code to do something right in the middle of that. That could really mess up the migration. And so because you can't do that unless the there's a type signature at the top of functions that says like if it can do a side effectful thing or not. And so because the migration function doesn't have that type signature, you can't do it. And yeah, so this sort of restriction then makes it much easier from Lamdera to do its thing and do it well. You don't need to like tell the users, oh, by the way, make sure not to do this thing or you're going to break your app in production. Another trade-off, so the CPU and memory resources for a Lamdera app are restricted. The reason for this is that when you write your backend, the backend code, it gets transpiled to JavaScript and runs in a Node instance. And so Node is typically single-threaded, and so you're stuck on a single thread when you're running an app. That might sound horrifying. And again, I call this hobby scale. It's not web scale because, yeah, don't use this if you're from Google. But there's a lot of applications out there where you don't need that much CPU power. All the things I've shown so far work fine with a single thread. Likewise with memory sources, they just work fine with a single thread. There's just not that many people hitting a web page made by an enthusiast in their free time. But even in the extreme cases, so for example, the asciilab website, I linked it on Hacker News. So it's like Reddit but for programmers. And within a 1 or 2 hour span, it was just the website was being absolutely bombarded with people. It was being bombarded with people spamming, copy pasting stuff that I won't mention here. But even despite all that, it was only like a couple spikes where the web page started slowing down, or like the back end started slowing down. It couldn't handle all the traffic, but otherwise it ran fine. I think a big part of that is, despite being more restricted in its resources, because Lamdera can choose exactly how, for example, it handles encoding and decoding data, because it can define that itself, it's just an implementation detail, it can do so in a very efficient way. So it's sending binary data to the front end, binary data to the back end. It doesn't need to generate a giant blob of JSON, for example. So the bandwidth is much less, even if your resources are also smaller. So yeah, there's trade-offs there. And of course, for example, the Really app, in that case, the reduced memory resources is an issue. So what we've chosen to do is, for example, we have a database with a large list of realtors, because we need to show the realtors on our the map we're displaying. So that large list of realtors, that's in an external database. We have control over that. We can choose how we want to represent that database. This comes at the cost then that because Lambda doesn't know about this database, it can't do migrations for it. It can't automatically encode and decode communication to the database. We have to do that ourselves. But it's an escape hatch where we pay a cost in the form of developer time. And the last trade-off then is vendor lock-in. So Lamdera is basically like vertically integrated, everything from development to deployment and hosting. And that's a big reason why it can work so well then, is because it doesn't need to worry about like, oh, but what if they use this database, or what if they use this type of way of deploying things, or this build script? Like, what if they want to use this, if we were allowing any language, what if they wanted to use TypeScript instead of JavaScript or something else, and with different, Webpack or Parcel? If all these options were available, then there's just no way Lamdera could be a particularly stable product, because there's just too many things to handle. Often these come at come in conflict with each other. That one build tool does not work well with another language, and so forth. So vendor lock-in means that Lamdera can work, can work very well within its contained universe, we'll call it. But vendor lock-in is still lock-in. So if Mario becomes evil one day and decides, nope, no more Lamdera for anyone, that sucks. Fortunately, though, there is a enterprise tier. So if you pay more money than usual, then you can have enterprise tier, which lets you have self-hosting. But again, if you're doing hobby stuff, this is probably less of a concern. And there's fortunately a hobby tier, which is free. So yeah, so if you're a business, then this stuff might concern you more than if you're a hobbyist. And in that case, you have another escape hatch in the form of paying more money. You get self-hosting. Yeah, so that's about it for my presentation. In conclusion, Lamdera is cool, but it's not suitable for everything. Let me stress that. I forgot to mention, actually, Lamdera has actually an anti-marketing page where it specifically goes through a list of why you should not use this product on the actual Lamdera website, which I think is really cool. I think it's good not to, oversell something and then just generate bad press because people misunderstand what this is for. But yeah, if you can use it, I recommend it. I mean, if you don't want to learn Elm, then fair enough. I guess it's not for you then. But if you want to learn Elm, or if you already know Elm, then yeah, I think you should definitely try this out. It's a huge time saver compared with, at least in my experience, needing to set up all the normal infrastructure work that goes into creating an app before actually writing the core business logic. Here are links if you want to explore any of the apps I made. These are all open source. I don't have links to everything. Like, for example, the credit sequence I made, that has a lot of personal information about my friends in it, so I'm not linking that. But most of the stuff is here. Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you.
Very interesting presentation. Very fun presentation also. I tried to select color, but people had other ideas.
I
should
told
really
my
have
sister to participate, and I'm certain she was bombarding purple. So
then I know.
there you go.
First question: How do you make ASCII T-shirts? Is that self, or there's a site or something? People asking, saying amazing T-shirts. So where do you make them?
I unfortunately don't remember. Maybe I remember. The site might be called Vistaprints.
Okay.
But if that's totally wrong, keep that in mind. Basically, it's a site that lets you print on the entire surface of the T-shirts, like the prints even on my shoulder, and it's on the back of my shirt.
Cool.
But yes, all I did was I took parts of the stuff that I'd drawn on the asciilab website, and I just put them together on a large large image, and I sent that image to this website, and then they sent me back a T-shirt. And it costed me like $40, $60. It was kind of expensive, but I'm really happy with it. So
yeah. It looks really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Second, there are probably people out there thinking, I like this ASCII website, and he had drawn little things. You should start selling off lots on your ASCII art. It's a good business idea, people.
Foolishly, it's an infinite canvas. So
oh my God! Don't tell it. Don't tell it.
I think it dilutes the property value. You should have told me this a year and a half ago.
Okay. Yes. Then how come you got into Elm? What was the reason behind?
The thing that really spurred it on, because I'd already heard about Elm before, but it was just in the back of my head, never really wanted, or never really got around to using it. But what spurred it on then was that at one of my past jobs, I was told at one point that I had the opportunity to help set up a website. We needed some kind of web app for something. I don't remember the details. But yeah, so this was a new website, greenfield project. I could pick the language. And so the first thing spinning through my head was not JavaScript, not JavaScript, not JavaScript. And so I thought, well, what else is there? And so then, because I already had learned, or not learned, but heard about Elm, so I figured, well, this is worth checking out. So I looked into it, and from there it just took off. It was like a language that really fit with what I was interested in, being simple, a pure language. People watching here hopefully know the advantages with functional style to programming. So
we hope so.
I don't need to repeat all that there, but language, the Elm language fit well when I wanted to do.
And then you're going live with the current site,
Really?
Realia,
Yep.
in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Hmm?
So maybe we don't
Cool.
run into some issue along the way.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the plan.
Cool. So if you're selling apartments in Stockholm, that's the people that you want to target.
We're starting in Gothenburg.
Oh, you're starting in Gothenburg,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
I'm not the business guy, but we've
No.
decided.
Stockholm is better, we know.
I'm just
Joking.
apparently the housing market's better there.
Oh, it is.
That's what my boss has told me.
Whoa.
Or maybe I've misheard, and that's not what he said at all. But
Oh, I'm
that's where we're
joking.
starting.
Yeah, they probably know more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, we also got a feedback here. Like, I've been meaning to do some more Elm as Haskell fan. This looks great. This looks like a great getaway to do so. Thanks for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Shout out. Yeah, thank you very much. With that said, thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Yes, then we are at the end of today's schedule. So the next meetup will be the 4th meetup of this year will be in 21st of April this year. And then we will be at the Volvo Cars showroom in Kungsträdgården. So if you're in Stockholm, or if you want to get to Stockholm, 21st of April, 18th set will be at Kungsträdgården at the Volvo Cars showroom. And as always, we will have 2 presentations, and of course, we will also live stream this. So welcome both on the stream and to come in real life. With that said, I want to thank again both presenters and all the viewers. Thank you very much, and have a pleasant evening. Bye.